Let's talk a little politics now. After finishing third in Iowa and fifth in New Hampshire, Marco Rubio is making his case right now to voters in South Carolina. Amid reports the senator's campaign is opening the door to an alternative scenario. In an article with the Associated Press entitled "Rubio Eyes Brokered Convention After New Hampshire Setback," his campaign manager is quoted as saying, "We very easily could be looking at May or the convention. I would be surprised if it's not May or the convention." What's the possibility of a brokered convention? Let's talk about it with our panel. Ford O'Connell is a Republican strategist and former presidential campaign advisor for McCain-Palin. Chuck Rocha is a Democratic strategist. Ford, to you first. Could this really go all the way to the convention?
Well, it could go all the way to the convention, but as long as we have a wide field and a muddled mainstream candidate lane, I'm going to tell you right now, Donald Trump is pretty much going to skate to the nomination. So it really depends on what happens in that mainstream establishment Republican lane. I will say this for Marco Rubio, it's a wee bit early to be talking about being part of that equation. He's got to have a good debate on Saturday night, and he's got to finish third in South Carolina and rack up as many delegates as possible.
Chuck, how do you see it?
Well, first, I'm impressed that he could say muddled mainstream without messing up. He's already better than Marco Rubio, and he only said it once. So what I'm getting at here is that Rubio got a long way to go. Ford's exactly right. He called it the muddled mainstream. So you can't even say it twice. That's because you got all these people in the middle figuring out who's going to be the alternative to Cruz and to Trump. Right now, everybody else is like dogs barking at a parade. It just keeps on going by, and they're just making a lot of noise. So his campaign manager has to gin this up to get some attention.
John,
because
yeah,
right now it's going down.
Let's understand. On Marco's part, let's understand what this really is. This is a message to donors saying, stick with me, and it's a message to Kasich and Bush saying, guess what, boys, I ain't getting out of that mainstream lane. But I will say this, we have to understand that, that the delegates become winner-take-all on March 15th. And at that point, there's still a majority. And if you have a two-man race at that point, someone is actually going to win it. If you have a three-man race with, say, Rubio, Cruz, and Trump, then we very well could go to a brokered convention. Remember, the magic number of the Republican Party is 1,273 delegates.
I think, is it 1,273, 1,237? Either way.
1,237, you're correct.
1,237. That's what I was going to get to. Let's help our viewers do the math here, because if you have 1,237 delegates on the Republican side, you've got enough to win the nomination. The thinking here is that there are so many candidates still in the race that if Donald Trump doesn't get those 1,237, or maybe Ted Cruz doesn't, then the other candidates who might still remain as late as convention time could force a brokered convention. Is it the stuff of Pulp Fiction, Chuck, or not?
Well, first of all, nobody told me we were going to do math today, so I'm throwing a flag on that to begin with. Second of all, I want to say that Ford makes the best point, which is when we get to these places where it's winner take all, then you see Trump and Cruz taking all of the air out of the room, and it becomes harder. Now, there's a lot more candidates than we've ever seen, and we've never seen an electorate probably this ginned up and this anti-all this establishment. So before I was saying Donald Trump was never going to get out of October. What do I know? I'm not going to say that there can't be a brokered convention, because this year anything could happen, and I'm going to quit saying that I know what's going to happen.
Chuck, the best way to have a brokered convention, as long as the field is wide, is basically for Ted Cruz to run up the numbers in the proportional states where evangelicals are greater than a majority. That is the closest way that you're going to get to a brokered convention, because, as I was saying earlier, if you get to March 15th and it's winner take all, Trump wins with a plurality of votes, and at that point there's still 50% of the delegates out there.
Well, Ford, I was going to say, I mean, Donald Trump did pretty well with evangelicals in Iowa.
He did very well with evangelicals, 27 to 23, but now as we move to South Carolina, the evangelicals like their barbecue just a little bit different, as Chuck knows, and they're a little bit more in tune to the church, and that's where Ted Cruz has to make his mark. If Ted Cruz does not find a way to do very well, particularly in South Carolina, guess what? We may be not stopping the Trump train at all.
You've got Kasich, you've got Bush, you've got Rubio, all kind of shooting it out in South Carolina. Chuck, do you expect that one of those guys is going to have to fold in the tent after South Carolina, or is this thing going to keep going on until May and beyond?
There's two things about South Carolina, and Ford brought up the most important one, which is barbecue. In South Carolina, they like a little more vinegar-based. Second of all, they're going to eventually run out of money. And so that's what you're getting at here, is that Bush has a super PAC propping him up, and some of these other folks have some rich folks propping them up. But these other candidates, like poor old Kasich, he doesn't have a super PAC or all these rich folks behind him. So you can't really make a long-haul effort because you literally run out of money.
To Chuck's point, people don't leave this race because they don't see a path to nomination. They leave this race because they don't got any money.
Smartest Republican I ever heard, right there.
All right.
Run out of money, you're out of it.
All right, there you go. Campaign 101. Ford O'Connell, Chuck Rocha. Thank you, guys.